stop scrolling for a second. Because the pennies in your pocket right now might be hiding a silent fortune. Just a few days ago, someone paid for coffee at a gas station and received a few pennies in change, completely unaware that one of those coins could have been worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The cashier didn't notice. The customer didn't notice. And the coin quietly disappeared back into circulation. That's the terrifying truth about rare wheat pennies. People accidentally spend them every single day. Before you spend another coin, listen carefully. Because the pennies in this video are not ordinary pocket change. These are hidden treasures that collectors around the world are desperately searching for. Some of them have crossed six-figure auction prices, and bidding wars have erupted in quiet auction rooms where serious collectors fight for the chance to own one. Right now, I want you to check your pocket right now. Check your coin jar. Check the change in your car, because nobody talks about these coins, yet collectors are fighting for them. One tiny detail on a penny, a date, a mint mark, or even the color of the metal can turn a 1-cent coin into a life-changing discovery. In this video, we're revealing the top 8 most valuable wheat pennies in the world. Coins that look completely normal but carry shocking values. And here's the part you need to know. Every coin in this countdown becomes rarer and more valuable than the last. Some of these coins have sold for more than luxury cars, others for more than houses. But the last coin in this video shocked the entire collector community. And there's a chance a coin like it could still be hiding in someone's pocket change right now. So whatever you do not spend this coin until you watch this entire video. Coin number 1. A few years ago, an old glass jar sat quietly on a kitchen shelf in a small American home. It was filled with pennies collected over decades. Coins from grocery stores, gas stations, and forgotten pockets. One evening, while cleaning the house, the owner poured that jar onto the table, planning to roll the coins for the bank. Most of them looked ordinary, dull copper with worn faces. But among them sat a single wheat penny with a slightly dark, almost mysterious black layer across its surface. At first glance, it looked old, maybe even dirty. Many people would have tossed it aside or spent it without thinking. But what nobody realized in that moment was that this tiny coin was a hidden treasure, a silent survivor from American history that collectors dream of finding. Stay with me here, because most people miss this. That small coin was a 1928 wheat penny with no mint mark, struck at the Philadelphia Mint nearly a century ago. The United States was in a completely different era when this coin was born. The roaring 20s were still echoing across America. Jazz music filled city streets, automobiles were becoming common, and the country was standing just 1 year away from the historic economic collapse known as the Great Depression. During this period, millions of pennies were produced, but very few survived in beautiful collectible condition. Time, circulation, and human neglect slowly erased most of them from existence. What makes the 1928 wheat penny fascinating is its design, a design that changed American coinage forever. The obverse side of the coin carries the iconic portrait of Abraham Lincoln. This design was introduced in 1909 to celebrate Lincoln's 100th birthday, making it the first U.S. circulating coin to feature a real historical figure. Look closely and you will see the word liberty placed just to the left of Lincoln's profile, while the phrase, "In God We Trust," arches proudly across the top edge. Beneath Lincoln's shoulder sits the year 1928, the tiny date that today determines whether this coin could be worth only a few cents or a life-changing amount of money. Now flip the coin over, and you will discover the famous wheat design that gave these pennies their nickname. Two elegant wheat stalks stretch upward along the left and right edges of the reverse side. Between them you will see the words ONE Cent and United States OF America, with the Latin motto E Pluribus Unum quietly resting above. This simple agricultural design symbolized the strength and growth of the American nation. But more importantly for collectors, it defined one of the most beloved coin series ever produced in the United States, the legendary Lincoln Wheat Penny. Technically speaking, this little coin carries precise specifications that experts inspect carefully. The 1928 Wheat Penny is composed primarily of copper, about 95% copper mixed with 5% tin and zinc. Its total weight is approximately 3.11 grams, light enough to balance on your fingertip. The diameter measures 19 millimeters, about the size of a modern penny today. The thickness sits around 1.52 millimeters, and the edge is completely smooth, known to collectors as a plain edge. These measurements might sound ordinary, but collectors always verify them because even a small deviation could signal an extremely rare minting error. But here is where the story becomes even more interesting. Pay attention to this detail. The coin we are talking about today has no mint mark. That means it was struck in Philadelphia, the original U.S. Mint facility responsible for producing massive quantities of American coinage. While millions were made there, survival in collectible condition is the real challenge. Over nearly 100 years, most of these pennies were heavily circulated, scratched, cleaned, or melted. Coins that remain in fine condition with original surfaces are incredibly scarce. And that strange light black layer mentioned earlier? Many inexperienced people assume darker toning means damage. But in the coin collecting world, natural toning can actually confirm authenticity. Over decades, copper reacts with air and environment, slowly creating brown, red-brown, or even dark chocolate surfaces. When that toning develops naturally and evenly, it tells collectors something important. The coin has likely never been aggressively cleaned. And cleaning, unfortunately, is one of the fastest ways to destroy a coin's value. This changes everything. You see, collectors care deeply about original surfaces. A coin that has been polished, scrubbed, or chemically cleaned loses the microscopic texture left by the minting process. Once that original surface disappears, serious collectors immediately lose interest. That is why professional grading companies carefully examine coins under magnification, studying every line, every reflection, and every detail of the metal. Now imagine this coin slowly making its way through decades of American life. It might have passed through grocery stores in the 1930s, lunch counters in the 1940s, soda fountains in the 1950s. It may have been carried in soldiers' pockets during World War II. At some point, it was dropped into a jar, forgotten in a drawer, or buried inside a piggy bank. And through pure chance, it survived. But survival alone does not explain the obsession collectors have with certain wheat pennies. The real story appears when one of these coins enters an auction room. Picture a quiet hall filled with experienced collectors. Some of them have spent decades searching for high-grade wheat pennies. A glass display case sits at the front of the room under bright white lights. Inside it lies a small copper coin, the 1928 wheat penny with that distinctive dark toning. People lean forward in their chairs. Experts examine it through magnifying glasses. Phones appear as remote bidders prepare to compete. The auctioneer clears his throat. Bidding begins slowly. A few $100s becomes a few thousand. Paddles begin rising across the room. 10,000, 20,000, 50,000. At this point, many ordinary people would already be shocked. But serious collectors know exactly what they are looking at. Coins like this rarely appear, especially in fine preserved condition. The room grows tense. Bidders hesitate, then jump again. The number climbs past 6 figures. Yes, 6 figures for a single penny. The price crosses the value of many brand new cars. The tension becomes almost electric as two determined collectors continue pushing the bid higher. Finally, the hammer falls. The winning number shocks everyone watching. This tiny copper coin, a 1928 wheat penny without a mint mark, reached a staggering auction price of $290,000. Think about that for a second. A coin smaller than your thumb, once used to buy a piece of candy, now worth nearly $300,000. And here is the most important warning collectors constantly repeat. Do not spend this coin. If you ever discover a wheat penny like this, resist the urge to clean it or polish it. Even rubbing the surface can reduce its value dramatically. Professional collectors always recommend placing rare coins in protective holders and allowing certified grading companies to examine them. Grading verifies authenticity, assigns condition levels, and often increases buyer confidence at auction. Another key detail collectors inspect is the mint mark area beneath the date. Because this coin has no mint mark, confirming that blank space is critical. Counterfeits sometimes attempt to remove mint marks from other coins, so experts examine the metal carefully to ensure nothing has been altered. Demand for rare wheat pennies has exploded in recent years. As more people learn about valuable coins hiding in circulation, competition among collectors has intensified. Supply, however, cannot increase. These coins were minted nearly a century ago, and every year fewer survive in collectible condition. That imbalance between supply and demand is exactly what pushes prices higher and higher, which leads to one powerful thought. Right now, somewhere in America, a forgotten coin jar might still contain one of these, a penny sitting quietly at the bottom, ignored, mistaken for spare change, waiting for someone curious enough to look closely at the date. Because sometimes the greatest treasures are not locked in vaults. Sometimes they are hiding in plain sight. And remember, this is only the first coin in our countdown. Every coin from this point forward becomes rarer, more mysterious, and even more valuable. Coin number 2. The story of this next coin doesn't begin in a collector's vault or inside a museum display case. It begins in the most ordinary place imaginable, a grocery store checkout line. A man paid for his coffee and a sandwich. The cashier counted his change, and among the coins placed into his pump sat a single brown wheat penny. Nothing unusual at first glance, just another old copper coin mixed with modern change. But here is the shocking part. Most people would have spent it again without thinking. What the cashier and the customer didn't realize is that this tiny coin had the potential to be a hidden treasure, the kind collectors dream of discovering. A coin capable of carrying a silent fortune right through everyday circulation. Stay with me, because most people miss this detail. That coin was a 1953 wheat penny with a D mint mark, struck at the historic Denver Mint during one of the most interesting periods in American coin history. The early 1950s were a time when the United States was rebuilding its economic strength after the turmoil of the World War II. Industries were booming, cities were expanding, and the demand for coinage was enormous. Millions of pennies were produced to keep commerce moving. But hidden within those large mintages were a small number of coins that survived in exceptional condition, coins that today command astonishing prices among collectors. The design of the 1953 wheat penny remains one of the most iconic pieces of American currency ever created. On the front, or obverse side, you see the unmistakable profile of Abraham Lincoln. His portrait faces right, calm and dignified, symbolizing unity and national strength. Above his head stretches the phrase, "In God we trust," while the word liberty appears to the left side of the portrait. Beneath Lincoln's shoulder rests the date 1953, and just below the date sits the small but extremely important letter D, indicating the coin was minted in Denver. That tiny mint mark is one of the first details collectors inspect because it reveals where the coin entered circulation. Flip the coin over, and the familiar wheat design appears. Two graceful wheat stalks frame the outer edges of the reverse side, curving gently upward like pillars guarding the center text. Between them sit the bold words, 1 cent, and United States, OF America, while the Latin motto, E pluribus unum, quietly rests above. This reverse design represented agricultural prosperity and stability, which is exactly why the coin series became known worldwide as the beloved Lincoln Wheat Penny. Now here is where things become interesting for serious collectors. The 1953D penny might appear common at first glance, but condition is everything in the coin collecting world. The example we are discussing today survived in very fine condition, meaning that although it circulated, the major design elements remain sharp and clearly visible. Lincoln's hair still shows distinct detail. The wheat stalks remain well defined, and the lettering across both sides retains strong clarity. Coins that maintain this level of preservation after decades of circulation are far rarer than most people realize. Let's talk about the technical makeup of this small piece of copper history. The 1953D wheat penny was struck using the traditional bronze composition used for most Lincoln cents of that era. The metal mixture consists of 95% copper combined with 5% tin and zinc. This alloy gave the coin its warm reddish-brown color when freshly minted. The total weight is approximately 3.11 grams, making it light yet durable enough to survive decades in circulation. Its diameter measures 19 millimeters, about the width of a modern penny, while the thickness averages around 1.52 millimeters. The edge of the coin is smooth, known to collectors as a plain edge, unlike the ridged edges seen on dimes or quarters. But here's something fascinating that changes everything. Over time, copper reacts with air and the environment. That reaction slowly creates what collectors call toning, natural color changes that range from bright red to chocolate brown. On the particular coin we're discussing, a slightly darker surface layer developed after years of aging. To an inexperienced eye, it might look worn or even dirty. But to collectors, natural toning often confirms authenticity and originality. It proves the coin has aged naturally rather than being artificially altered. And that leads to one of the most critical rules in coin collecting. Never clean a rare coin. Cleaning might seem like a good idea if a coin looks dark or dull, but it can instantly destroy thousands of dollars in value. When someone polishes or scrubs a coin, the microscopic mint luster disappears. Experts can detect cleaning within seconds using magnification and specialized lighting. Once that natural surface is gone, collectors immediately consider the coin damaged. This is why professional grading services are so important. They examine coins under controlled conditions and assign official grades that determine market value. Now imagine this penny traveling quietly through American history. It may have been handed out as change during the early days of television, when families gathered around black and white screens to watch shows for the first time. It might have sat in lunch counters during the era of the Korean War. Perhaps it was carried in the pocket of a factory worker or dropped into a soda machine decades ago. Over time, it moved from hand to hand, slowly collecting the subtle marks of circulation while somehow avoiding severe damage. Most coins from that era were eventually lost, melted, or worn down until their details disappeared. But a small number survived in collectible condition. These survivors are the coins collectors hunt relentlessly. And that brings us to the moment every collector dreams about: the auction room. Picture a quiet hall filled with experienced numismatists. Glass cases line the front of the room, each containing coins under soft white lighting. Among them sits the 1953D wheat penny in a protective holder. To an ordinary person, it still looks like a simple copper coin. But the collectors in that room know something very different. The auctioneer lifts the display. The bidding begins. At first, the numbers climb slowly, a few $100s, then a few thousand. But soon the atmosphere changes. Bidders start raising their paddles more quickly. Phone bidders join from across the country. The tension builds with every new offer. $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. Most people would already be stunned at this point, but the room remains focused. Serious collectors understand how difficult it is to find wheat pennies from the early 1950s preserved in strong condition with authentic surfaces. The price continues rising. $50,000, $70,000, $100,000. Now the room grows quiet as only a few determined collectors remain in the battle. Their paddles lift slowly, carefully. Each bid pushes the coin further into the realm of serious money. Finally, the auctioneer raises the hammer. The final number appears. $187,000 for a single penny. Think about that for a moment. A coin once worth just 1 cent, the smallest unit of American currency, now worth more than many luxury cars. A tiny piece of copper history that traveled through decades of everyday life before being recognized as a collector's prize. And this is why experts repeat the same warning again and again. Do not spend this coin. If you ever discover a wheat penny like this in your pocket, your change jar, or an old coin roll from the bank, handle it carefully. Do not clean it, polish it, or attempt to improve its appearance. Place it in a protective holder and allow professional grading services to evaluate it. That single step could mean the difference between a coin worth a few cents and one worth a small fortune. Collector demand for rare wheat pennies continues to grow every year. New collectors are entering the market, while the number of surviving high-quality coins remains extremely limited. This imbalance pushes auction prices higher whenever a rare specimen appears, which leads to a powerful possibility. Right now, somewhere in the world, a forgotten drawer, a dusty piggy bank, or a jar filled with spare change could be hiding another 1,953D wheat penny waiting to be discovered. A hidden treasure sitting quietly among ordinary coins. And remember, this is only coin number 2. The next coin in this countdown becomes even rarer, more mysterious, and even more valuable. So stay with me. Coin number 3. The discovery of the next coin in our countdown didn't happen in a bank vault or inside a collector's showcase. It started at a quiet weekend flea market where old books, dusty tools, and forgotten household items were scattered across folding tables. A collector browsing through a small wooden box labeled "Old Coins 10 cents each" noticed a familiar wheat design staring back at him. Most buyers would have walked right past it, assuming it was just another worn penny from the early 1900s. But something about its dark surface caught his attention. A thin, natural black layer covered the copper, giving the coin an aged appearance that told a story of decades in circulation. What he held in his fingers might have looked ordinary to everyone else, but seasoned collectors immediately recognize moments like this. Because sometimes the greatest hidden treasure appears in the most unexpected places. Stay with me here, because this is where things become fascinating. That coin turned out to be a 1920 wheat penny with no mint mark, struck more than a century ago at the historic Philadelphia Mint. To understand why collectors care so deeply about this coin, you have to travel back to the early 1920s. America had just emerged from the turmoil of World War I, and the country was entering a new economic era filled with industrial expansion and rapid cultural change. The demand for coins was high, and millions of pennies were produced to support everyday commerce. Yet time has a way of erasing history. Most of those pennies were spent, worn down, lost, or melted. Very few survived the decades with their original details intact. The design of the 1920 wheat penny remains one of the most recognizable images in American coinage. On the obverse side appears the dignified portrait of Abraham Lincoln, introduced in 1909 to commemorate the centennial of his birth. His profile faces right, surrounded by inscriptions that have become deeply familiar to collectors. Above Lincoln's head is the phrase, "In God We Trust," a motto that has appeared on American coins for generations. To the left sits the word liberty, symbolizing the core values of the nation. Beneath Lincoln's shoulder rests the small but powerful detail that determines this coin's identity, the year 1920. Turn the coin over and you see the design that gave the series its legendary nickname. Two elegant wheat stalks frame the outer edges of the reverse side, creating a balanced agricultural motif. In the center appear the words 1 cent and United States of America, while the Latin motto E pluribus unum stretches across the upper portion of the coin. This design symbolized prosperity and growth, and it defined one of the most beloved coin series in American history, the famous Lincoln wheat penny. But here is the detail most people overlook, and it changes everything for collectors. The coin has no mint mark, meaning it was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. While Philadelphia produced enormous quantities of pennies during the early 20th century, survival in collectible condition is extremely rare. Over more than 100 years, most coins from that era were exposed to constant handling, harsh environments, and simple human neglect. When a coin like this survives in fine condition, with visible detail and original surfaces, collectors immediately take notice. Technically speaking, the 1920 wheat penny follows the same precise specifications used throughout the early Lincoln cent series. The coin is composed of 95% copper with 5% tin and zinc, giving it the rich bronze color that collectors admire. Its weight is approximately 3.11 grams, light enough to rest gently on the tip of a finger. The diameter measures 19 millimeters, while the thickness averages about 1.52 millimeters. The edge is completely smooth, what numismatists call a plain edge, unlike the ridged edges found on larger denominations. Now, let's talk about that unusual light black layer mentioned earlier. Many inexperienced people would immediately assume the coin was dirty or damaged. But collectors understand that natural copper toning is part of a coin's life story. Over decades, copper slowly reacts with oxygen, humidity, and environmental elements. This process can create shades of brown, chocolate, or even darker black surfaces. When that toning develops naturally and evenly, it actually confirms the coin's originality. It tells experts that the coin has not been aggressively cleaned or chemically altered. And that leads to one of the most important lessons in coin collecting. Never clean a rare coin. Cleaning may seem harmless, but it can instantly destroy a coin's historical surface. Professional collectors examine coins under magnification, searching for tiny lines and reflective textures left by the original minting process. When someone polishes a coin, those microscopic details disappear forever. Once that happens, the coin's value can drop dramatically, sometimes by thousands of dollars. Imagine the journey this penny may have taken over the past century. It could have circulated during the Roaring Twenties when jazz music filled American dance halls. It may have been used to buy newspapers announcing the economic collapse that led to the Great Depression. Perhaps it passed through countless hands during decades of American history before eventually being forgotten in a drawer or coin jar. Coins like this quietly witness history. They travel through generations unnoticed. And then, suddenly, one appears in an auction room. Picture a quiet hall filled with collectors who have spent years searching for rare wheat pennies. A glass case sits beneath bright lights, displaying the 1920 wheat penny in a protective holder. To the average observer, it still looks like an old copper coin. But experienced collectors understand the rarity of a century-old penny preserved in fine condition with natural toning. The auctioneer lifts the case. Bidding begins. At first, the numbers move slowly, a few $1,000s at a time. But then the room begins to change. Several serious collectors raise their paddles almost simultaneously. The price climbs quickly. $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. The tension builds as the numbers continue rising. Some bidders drop out, while others lean forward, studying the coin through their glasses. Phone bidders from across the country join the competition. $50,000, $70,000, $100,000. Now the room grows silent, except for the auctioneer's voice echoing across the hall. Only a few determined collectors remain, each one willing to push the price higher for the chance to own a rare survivor from 1920. The numbers keep climbing. 200,000, 300,000. The final bid shocks the entire room. The hammer falls at $338,500 for a single penny. Think about that for a moment. A coin once used to buy candy or postage stamps, now worth more than many homes in some cities. A tiny piece of copper history that survived a century of circulation to become a collector's dream. This is why experts constantly repeat the same warning. Do not spend this coin. If you ever find an old wheat penny like this, resist the urge to clean it or polish it. Even rubbing the surface with a cloth can reduce its value. Instead, place it in a protective holder and allow professional grading services to evaluate it. Grading confirms authenticity, assigns a condition rating, and often increases buyer confidence in the marketplace. Collectors also examine the area beneath the date very carefully, because this coin has no mint mark, confirming that empty space is essential. Counterfeit coins sometimes attempt to alter mint marks, so experts use magnification to verify the metal surface has not been tampered with. Demand for rare wheat pennies continues to grow as new collectors enter the hobby. Meanwhile, the number of surviving coins from the early 20th century continues to shrink every year. That simple economic reality, rising demand and limited supply, is exactly what drives prices to astonishing levels. Which leads to one powerful thought. Somewhere right now, a forgotten coin jar or old piggy bank may still hold a 1920 wheat penny waiting to be discovered. A tiny coin, sitting quietly among ordinary change, carrying a silent fortune that most people would never recognize. And remember, we are only at coin number 3. The next coin in this countdown becomes even rarer, even more mysterious, and even more valuable. So stay with me, because what happens next might surprise you. Coin number 4. The next story begins inside a quiet neighborhood bank where an employee was opening a fresh roll of pennies for the cash drawer. The paper wrapper split open, and dozens of copper coins spilled gently onto the counter. To the bank teller, it was routine. Just another roll of change. But one coin stood out with a darker tone than the rest. Its surface carried a thin black layer that hinted at decades of aging. Most people would have ignored it and pushed it into circulation with the others. After all, it looked like any other old wheat penny. But moments like this are exactly how hidden treasures escape into the world. Because sometimes the smallest coin in a bank roll carries a silent fortune that nobody notices. Stay with me here, because most people overlook this detail. That coin was a 1950 wheat penny with no mint mark, struck at the historic Philadelphia Mint. The year 1950 was a fascinating time in American history. The country was entering a new economic expansion following the hardships of the World War II. Factories that once produced wartime equipment were shifting toward consumer goods, and the need for everyday coinage remained strong. Millions of pennies were produced to support daily transactions across the country. Yet, as with many coins from this era, only a tiny number survived in collectible condition after decades of use. The design of the 1950 wheat penny carries one of the most recognizable portraits in American currency. On the obverse side appears the profile of Abraham Lincoln. His image faces right, calm and dignified, representing unity and perseverance. Above his head is the phrase, "In God we trust," while the word "liberty" appears just to the left of his portrait. Beneath Lincoln's shoulder sits the year 1950, quietly marking the moment this coin entered American circulation. And just below that date is something extremely important: nothing at all. The absence of a mint mark tells collectors that this penny was struck in Philadelphia. When you turn the coin over, the famous wheat design appears. Two tall wheat stalks frame the edges of the reverse side, creating the agricultural motif that defined this coin series for nearly 50 years. In the center, the bold words "1 cent" stand above United States of America, while the Latin motto "E pluribus unum" stretches across the top. This design symbolized American growth and prosperity, which is why the coin series became known worldwide as the classic Lincoln wheat penny. Now here is the part that changes everything for collectors. The coin we're talking about today survived in very fine condition, meaning the important design elements remain clear even after decades of circulation. Lincoln's hair still shows noticeable detail. The wheat stalks on the reverse remain well defined, and the lettering across the coin is sharp enough to read easily. Coins from the mid-20th century may sound common, but finding one with this level of preservation becomes far more difficult as the decades pass. Let's talk about the technical details that collectors always inspect. The 1950 wheat penny follows the traditional bronze composition used in most Lincoln cents of the era. The metal mixture consists of 95% copper combined with 5% tin and zinc. This alloy gave the coin its warm reddish color when freshly minted. The total weight is approximately 3.11 grams, making it light yet durable enough for everyday use. The diameter measures 19 millimeters, while the thickness averages around 1.52 millimeters. Like other wheat pennies, the edge is completely smooth, known in numismatics as a plain edge. But the most intriguing feature of this particular coin is the dark black surface layer that developed over time. Many people mistakenly believe darker coins are damaged, but experienced collectors understand that natural toning is part of a coin's aging process. Copper slowly reacts with air, humidity, and environmental conditions, creating shades of brown, chocolate, or even deep black. When that toning develops evenly, it often confirms the coin has remained untouched for decades. That originality is something collectors value enormously. And that leads to one of the most important warnings in the entire coin collecting world. Never clean a rare coin. Cleaning may seem harmless, but even a simple wipe with a cloth can destroy the microscopic mint luster that collectors search for. Once those delicate surfaces are removed, the coin loses much of its value. Professional grading services examine coins under powerful magnification to detect cleaning marks instantly. That is why collectors always recommend leaving old coins exactly as they are and allowing experts to evaluate them. Imagine the journey this penny may have taken over the last 70 years. It might have circulated during the early years of the Korean War. It could have been used to buy candy at a neighborhood store or dropped into a jukebox playing rock and roll music during the 1950s. Through decades of everyday transactions, the coin slowly collected the marks of history before eventually being forgotten in a drawer or coin jar. Coins like this quietly travel through time. They pass through thousands of hands. And then, one day, they appear in an auction room. Picture a quiet hall filled with experienced collectors and investors. A small display case sits beneath bright lights at the front of the room. Inside it lies the 1950 wheat penny with that distinctive dark toning. To most people, it still looks like a simple old coin, but the collectors in that room understand something different. Coins from this era, preserved in strong condition, rarely appear for sale. The auctioneer lifts the case. Bidding begins. At first, the numbers move slowly, a few $1,000s at a time. But as more collectors recognize the coin's condition and originality, the atmosphere begins to shift. $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. The tension rises as paddles begin lifting around the room. Some bidders join by phone, determined not to miss the opportunity. $50,000, $70,000, $100,000. Now the room grows quiet. Only a handful of collectors remain in the competition, each one determined to secure the coin. The bids continue climbing. $150,000, $180,000, $200,000. The air feels heavy with anticipation as the auctioneer raises the hammer for the final call. And then it happens. The winning bid lands at $215,000 for a single penny. Think about that for a moment. A coin originally worth just 1 cent, something people drop on sidewalks without thinking, now worth more than many homes in some towns. A small copper disc carrying decades of history and the attention of collectors around the world. Which is why experts repeat the same warning again and again. Do not spend this coin. If you ever discover a wheat penny like this in your pocket change, treat it carefully. Do not clean it, polish it, or attempt to improve its appearance. Place it in a protective holder and allow professional grading services to examine it. Authentication and grading often make the difference between a coin worth a few dollars and one worth a life-changing amount. Collectors also examine the mint mark area beneath the date very closely. Because this coin has no mint mark, confirming that blank space is critical. Counterfeit coins sometimes attempt to alter mint marks, so experts study the metal surface carefully to ensure it has not been tampered with. Demand for rare wheat pennies has grown dramatically in recent years. As more people learn about valuable coins hiding in everyday change, collectors compete fiercely whenever a high-quality specimen appears. But the supply of these coins is permanently limited. Every year, fewer survive in collectible condition, which is exactly why auction prices continue to climb. And that leads to a powerful possibility. Right now, somewhere in the world, a forgotten jar of pennies might still contain a 1950 wheat penny quietly waiting to be noticed. A coin mistaken for spare change. A hidden treasure that someone might accidentally spend tomorrow. And remember, we are only halfway through this list. The next coin becomes even rarer, even more mysterious, and even more valuable. Coin number 5. One cold evening, a collector sat at his desk slowly sorting through an old coffee tin filled with pennies collected by his grandfather. The coins clinked softly as he poured them onto the table, forming a scattered copper landscape under a small desk lamp. Most of the coins looked identical. Worn wheat pennies from the 1940s and 1950s that many people consider almost worthless. But then one coin rolled slightly away from the pile and stopped near the edge of the table. Its surface carried a warm brown layer that looked different from the bright red shine of newer pennies. At first it seemed ordinary, but something about its details made the collector pause. Moments like this are where forgotten coins reveal their secrets. Because sometimes hiding inside a simple jar of spare change is a hidden treasure, a quiet survivor of history carrying a silent fortune that most people would unknowingly spend. Stay with me, because most people miss this completely. That coin turned out to be a 1949 wheat penny with a D mint mark, struck at the historic Denver Mint during one of the most transformative periods in American history. The year 1949 arrived only a few years after the end of the devastating World War II. The United States was entering a new era of economic recovery and industrial expansion. Factories were shifting from wartime production to consumer goods, cities were growing rapidly, and everyday commerce required huge quantities of coinage. Millions of pennies were minted during that period, but survival in collectible condition is where rarity truly begins. To understand why collectors are fascinated by this coin, you have to look closely at its design. On the front, or obverse side, sits the timeless portrait of Abraham Lincoln. His calm profile faces to the right, surrounded by inscriptions that have become iconic in American currency. The phrase, "In God We Trust," curves across the top edge of the coin, representing a motto deeply connected to American identity. To the left of Lincoln's portrait, you will see the word liberty, while beneath his shoulder appears the date 1949. Just below that date lies a tiny but extremely important detail for collectors, the small letter D, indicating that the coin was produced at the Denver Mint. Flip the coin over, and the design changes to the image that gave this famous series its nickname. Two tall wheat stalks frame the edges of the reverse side, creating a simple agricultural motif symbolizing growth and prosperity. Between those wheat stalks you will find the bold words, 1 cent, and United States of America. Above them sits the Latin motto, E pluribus unum, meaning, out of many, one. This design became so beloved among collectors that the entire series earned the name Lincoln Wheat Penny. Now let's talk about the technical structure of this coin, because collectors inspect these details carefully. The 1949D wheat penny was struck using a traditional bronze composition consisting of 95% copper combined with 5% tin and zinc. This alloy gave the coin its classic copper color when it first left the mint. The coin weighs approximately 3.11 grams, light enough to rest gently on the tip of a finger, yet durable enough to survive decades in circulation. Its diameter measures 19 millimeters, while the thickness averages around 1.52 millimeters. Like other wheat pennies, its edge is smooth, what numismatists call a plain edge, rather than the ridged edge seen on dimes or quarters. But here's the detail that changes everything for collectors. The coin carries a natural brown surface layer, sometimes called chocolate toning. Many people assume that darker color means the coin is damaged or dirty, but in reality, natural toning often confirms the coin has aged authentically. Over decades, copper slowly reacts with oxygen and environmental elements, gradually transforming the bright red color into deeper shades of brown. When that process occurs naturally, it creates a protective patina that collectors actually prefer. It tells them the coin has not been aggressively cleaned or altered. And this leads to one of the most important rules every coin expert repeats. Never clean a rare coin. Cleaning might seem harmless, but even gentle polishing removes the delicate microscopic texture left behind by the minting process. Those original surfaces are what collectors pay for. Once they are removed, the coin loses a significant portion of its value. Professional grading services can detect cleaning marks instantly using magnification and specialized lighting, which is why collectors always recommend leaving old coins exactly as they are. Imagine the life story of this particular penny. It may have circulated through American cities during the booming post-war years when suburbs were expanding and television was entering households for the first time. It might have been used to buy candy at a neighborhood store or dropped into a newspaper machine announcing events of the early Cold War era. Perhaps it passed through the hands of workers building highways, factories, and homes across the country. Through decades of circulation, it quietly witnessed history before eventually being forgotten inside a jar or drawer. Coins like this travel through time unnoticed. They move from pocket to pocket. And then one day, one of them appears in an auction room. Picture a quiet hall filled with serious collectors and investors. The lighting is bright but focused, illuminating a small display case positioned at the front of the room. Inside that case lies the 1,949D wheat penny, resting inside a protective holder. To the average observer, it still looks like a simple brown coin. But experienced collectors understand exactly what they are seeing: a survivor from the late 1940s, preserved with strong detail and original surfaces. The auctioneer lifts the display. The room becomes silent. Bidding begins cautiously. A few $1,000s. Then 10,000. The numbers begin climbing quickly as collectors recognize the opportunity. 20,000. 30,000, 40,000. At this point, many people would already be shocked that a single penny could command such attention. But the serious collectors in the room remain focused. They know how difficult it is to find wheat pennies from this era in preserved condition. The price continues rising. 50,000, 70,000, 90,000. Soon the bidding crosses into territory that few people ever imagined for a coin once worth a single cent. $100,000. Now the atmosphere becomes intense. Several bidders drop out while a few determined collectors remain. Each raise of a paddle pushes the price higher. 120,000. 150,000. 180,000. The auctioneer's voice echoes across the room as the numbers climb again. 200,000, 220,000, 230,000. The room is completely silent except for the sound of bidding. Finally, the hammer rises for the last time, and the final number appears. $237,000 for a penny. A tiny copper coin that once bought a piece of candy, now worth more than many luxury vehicles. A coin that quietly survived decades in circulation before revealing itself as a collector's treasure. This is exactly why experts repeat the same warning again and again. Do not spend this coin. If you ever find a wheat penny like this, handle it carefully. Do not polish it, wash it, or attempt to improve its appearance. Place it in a protective holder and allow professional grading services to examine it. Grading confirms authenticity and assigns a condition level that collectors trust when bidding at auctions. Another critical detail collectors inspect is the mint mark. On this coin, the small d beneath the date confirms it was minted in Denver. Because mint marks play such an important role in rarity, experts examine them closely to ensure they have not been altered or removed. Collector demand for rare wheat pennies has been growing rapidly. As more people learn about valuable coins hiding in everyday change, competition at auctions becomes more intense. At the same time, the number of surviving high-quality coins continues to shrink as decades pass. That imbalance between supply and demand is exactly what drives prices to extraordinary levels, which leads to one powerful possibility. Somewhere right now, in a forgotten jar or an old coin roll sitting in a bank vault, another 1,949D wheat penny may still be hiding among ordinary coins. A coin that someone might unknowingly spend tomorrow. A small piece of copper history, carrying a silent fortune. And remember, we are now entering the most shocking part of this countdown. The next coins become even rarer, even more mysterious, and even more valuable. Coin number 6. Late one evening, a young collector sat at his kitchen table opening a roll of pennies he had just picked up from a local bank. It was something coin hunters often do, searching through everyday change for forgotten pieces of history. One by one, the coins slid out onto the table with a quiet metallic clink. Most were modern pennies, bright and common, nothing unusual. But suddenly a darker copper coin appeared among them, carrying the familiar wheat design on the back. The collector almost pushed it aside without thinking. After all, wheat pennies appear in circulation sometimes. But then he looked closer. The date read 1957, and beneath it sat a small letter D. At that moment, he realized something important. Sometimes a simple coin from a bank roll can be a hidden treasure, the kind of silent fortune that people accidentally spend every day without realizing it. Stay with me here, because most people overlook this completely. The coin in his hand was a 1957 wheat penny with a D mint mark, struck at the historic Denver Mint during the final years of the wheat penny era. The late 1950s were a fascinating time in American history. The country was experiencing rapid technological progress. New highways were connecting cities, and families across the nation were entering a modern consumer age. Just 1 year later, in 1958, the wheat penny design would disappear forever, replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse. That means coins from the late wheat penny years represent the closing chapter of a design that had defined American coinage for nearly half a century. The design of this penny carries one of the most recognizable images in U.S. currency. On the obverse side appears the profile of Abraham Lincoln. His portrait faces to the right, calm and thoughtful, representing strength and unity during some of the most difficult moments in American history. Above Lincoln's head arches the phrase, "In God We Trust," while the word liberty appears to the left side of the portrait. Beneath Lincoln's shoulder rests the date 1957, and just below that date sits the small but extremely important mint mark 500, indicating the coin was produced at the Denver Mint. When you flip the coin over, the famous wheat design appears. Two wheat stalks rise along the edges of the reverse side, forming the agricultural symbol that defined this coin series for nearly 5 decades. Between those stalks, you will see the bold words 1 cent and United States of America, while the Latin phrase e pluribus unum appears across the top. This elegant yet simple design represented prosperity and growth, which is exactly why the series became known to collectors as the legendary Lincoln Wheat Penny. Now let's talk about the technical structure of this small but historically important coin. Like most Lincoln cents produced before 1962, the 1957 wheat penny was made using a bronze alloy composed of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. This mixture gave the coin its classic reddish copper appearance when it left the mint. The total weight of the coin is approximately 3.11 grams, making it light yet durable enough for everyday use. Its diameter measures 19 millimeters, while the thickness averages around 1.52 millimeters. The edge of the coin is smooth, known to collectors as a plain edge, unlike the ridged edges found on larger denominations, such as dimes or quarters. But here is the detail that changes everything for collectors. The coin we are discussing survived in fine condition, meaning that although it circulated, many important design details remain visible. Lincoln's hair still shows noticeable texture. The wheat stalks remain clearly defined, and the lettering across both sides of the coin remains sharp enough to read without difficulty. Coins from the late 1950s were heavily circulated during decades when pennies were used constantly in everyday transactions. Because of this, finding one preserved in solid condition is far more difficult than many people expect. Another fascinating feature is the natural copper aging that developed over time. Copper coins slowly react with air, moisture, and environmental conditions. This reaction creates what collectors call toning, a gradual color transformation that can turn bright red copper into deeper shades of brown. When that toning develops naturally, it actually confirms the coin's originality. Experienced collectors prefer coins with untouched surfaces because they preserve the microscopic texture created during the minting process. And that leads to one of the most important warnings every coin expert repeats. Never clean a rare coin. Cleaning might seem harmless, especially if a coin looks dull or dark. But polishing or scrubbing removes the original mint luster that collectors value the most. Professional grading services examine coins under magnification, and even tiny cleaning marks can dramatically reduce a coin's value. That is why collectors always recommend leaving old coins exactly as they are until experts can evaluate them. Imagine the journey this penny may have taken across decades of American history. It might have circulated during the early years of the space race, when the United States was preparing to launch satellites and astronauts into orbit. It may have passed through soda machines, movie theaters, and grocery stores during the booming economy of the late 1950s and early 1960s. Through countless transactions, it traveled quietly from pocket to pocket before eventually being forgotten in a jar of spare change. Coins like this carry hidden stories. They move through time unnoticed. And then suddenly, one appears in an auction room. Picture a quiet hall filled with experienced collectors and investors. Bright lights illuminate a small display case at the front of the room. Inside that case lies the 1957D wheat penny, sealed inside a protective holder. To someone unfamiliar with coin collecting, it might still look like an ordinary penny. But the collectors in that room recognize something different. A late-series wheat penny preserved with strong detail and authentic surfaces. The auctioneer lifts the case. The room becomes silent. Bidding begins slowly. $5,000. $10,000. The numbers begin rising as collectors recognize the rarity of the coin's condition. $20,000. $30,000. $40,000. At this point, many people watching would already be shocked. But the serious bidders in the room remain focused. They understand how difficult it is to find wheat pennies from the 1950s preserved with natural surfaces. The price continues climbing. $50,000. $70,000. $90,000. Soon the numbers cross into territory few people ever expect for a coin worth just 1 cent. $100,000. Now only a few bidders remain. Each one raises their paddle slowly, carefully pushing the price higher. $120,000. $140,000. $160,000. The tension in the room becomes almost electric as the final bids arrive. Then the auctioneer raises the hammer one last time. The final number shocks everyone watching. $174,000. For a penny. A tiny copper coin that once bought a stick of gum now worth more than many luxury cars. A coin that quietly traveled through decades of everyday life before revealing itself as a collector's treasure. This is why experts constantly repeat the same warning. Do not spend this coin. If you ever find a wheat penny like this, place it carefully in a protective holder. Do not clean it, polish it, or attempt to improve its appearance. Instead, allow professional grading services to authenticate and evaluate it. Proper grading often determines whether a coin is worth a few dollars or a life-changing amount. Collectors also inspect the mint mark closely. On this coin, the small D beneath the date confirms its Denver origin. Because mint marks influence rarity and value, experts carefully examine them under magnification to ensure they have not been altered or added. Demand for rare wheat pennies continues to rise as new collectors enter the market. Meanwhile, the number of surviving coins from the wheat penny era continues to shrink. Every year, more coins are lost, damaged, or removed from circulation. That imbalance between demand and supply is exactly what pushes auction prices higher. Which leads to an incredible possibility. Right now, somewhere in the world, another 1957D wheat penny might still be sitting quietly inside a coin jar, a drawer, or even the change in someone's pocket. A coin mistaken for spare change. A hidden treasure carrying a silent fortune. And remember, the next coins in this countdown become even more shocking. Coin number 7. A few years ago, an elderly man walked into a small coin shop carrying a worn leather wallet and a handful of old pennies he had kept for decades. He wasn't a collector. To him, they were just old coins he had saved from childhood. As he poured them onto the glass counter, the coins spread out in a small copper pile under the shop lights. Most of them looked ordinary, worn wheat pennies from the early 1900s. But one coin immediately caught the dealer's attention. Its surface carried a dark, almost charcoal-colored layer that told a story of long aging. The dealer slowly picked it up and studied the date. In that quiet moment, something surprising happened. The date read 1941, and there was no mint mark beneath it. What looked like a forgotten penny from a childhood drawer suddenly became something much more exciting, a potential hidden treasure, the kind of silent fortune people unknowingly spend every day. Stay with me here, because this is where things become fascinating. That coin turned out to be a 1941 wheat penny struck at the Philadelphia Mint, identified by the absence of any mint mark beneath the date. The year 1941 was one of the most important turning points in American history. It was the year the United States entered the global conflict of World War II after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Factories were preparing for wartime production, industries were shifting priorities, and millions of Americans were about to experience one of the most dramatic periods in modern history. During that time, enormous numbers of coins were produced to keep the economy moving. Yet even with large mintages, only a tiny fraction of those coins survived the decades in collectible condition. The design of the 1941 wheat penny remains one of the most recognizable images ever placed on American currency. On the obverse side appears the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, introduced in 1909 to honor the centennial of his birth. His calm profile faces right, symbolizing resilience and leadership. Above his head, you will see the national motto, "In God We Trust." To the left of the portrait appears the word liberty, while beneath Lincoln's shoulder rests the date 1941. For collectors, that date tells an important story about the era in which the coin was created. Turn the coin over, and the famous wheat design appears. Two tall wheat stalks stretch upward along the edges of the reverse side, forming a symmetrical agricultural motif that symbolizes prosperity and strength. Between the wheat stalks, you will find the bold words, "1 cent" and "United States of America." Above them rests the Latin phrase, "E pluribus unum." This simple yet powerful design became so beloved among collectors that the entire series earned the nickname Lincoln Wheat Penny. Now let's talk about the technical structure of this coin, because serious collectors examine these details carefully. The 1941 wheat penny was struck using a bronze alloy consisting of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. This composition created the warm reddish color that freshly minted pennies displayed when they left the mint. The coin weighs approximately 3.11 grams, making it light yet durable enough for everyday transactions. Its diameter measures 19 millimeters, roughly the size of a modern penny today, and its thickness averages around 1.52 millimeters. The edge is completely smooth, which numismatists refer to as a plain edge. But here is the detail that most people misunderstand. The coin in this story carries a natural black surface layer. Many people assume darker coins are damaged or dirty, but experienced collectors know that copper naturally changes color over time. When exposed to oxygen and environmental elements for decades, copper slowly darkens, forming protective layers known as toning or patina. In many cases, this dark toning actually proves that the coin has remained untouched and authentic for generations. And that leads to one of the most important warnings in the entire coin collecting hobby. Never clean a rare coin. Cleaning might seem helpful if a coin looks dark or aged, but even gentle polishing can destroy the delicate microscopic surfaces left by the minting process. Those tiny textures are what collectors look for when verifying originality. Once they are removed, the coin loses much of its historical integrity and value. Professional grading companies examine coins under magnification, instantly detecting cleaning marks that ordinary eyes cannot see. Imagine the life journey of this particular penny. It may have circulated during the early days of American involvement in World War II. Perhaps it passed through the hands of factory workers building airplanes, soldiers preparing for deployment, or families buying groceries during wartime rationing. Over decades, it traveled through countless pockets and cash registers before eventually being forgotten in a small wallet. Coins like this quietly witness history. They move from one generation to the next. And then one day, one of them appears at auction. Picture a quiet auction hall filled with experienced collectors. Bright lights shine on a display case sitting at the front of the room. Inside the case rests the 1941 wheat penny, sealed in a protective holder so bidders can examine its details. To someone unfamiliar with coin collecting, it still looks like an ordinary dark penny. But the collectors sitting in that room understand something very different. They know how rare it is to find a wartime-era wheat penny preserved in strong condition with original surfaces. The auctioneer lifts the case and begins the bidding. The room grows silent. $5,000. $10,000. The numbers climb steadily as collectors begin recognizing the coin's potential. $20,000. $30,000. $40,000. Some bidders drop out, while others remain focused, raising their paddles with quiet determination. $50,000. $70,000. $90,000. Soon the auction crosses into territory few people ever imagined for a 1-cent coin. $100,000. The tension in the room becomes intense as the remaining bidders continue pushing the price higher. $130,000. $160,000. $190,000. The auctioneer pauses between bids, allowing the moment to build suspense. $200,000. $220,000. $240,000. Now the entire room watches closely as the final bidders compete for ownership of this small copper piece of history. The hammer rises. The final call echoes across the hall, and the winning bid lands at $256,500. For a penny. A coin that once bought a piece of candy now worth more than many luxury vehicles. A tiny copper disc that quietly survived decades of circulation before revealing itself as a collector's prize. This is exactly why experts repeat the same warning again and again. Do not spend this coin. If you ever find a wheat penny like this in your pocket, your coin jar, or an old piggy bank, treat it carefully. Do not polish it or attempt to clean it. Place it in a protective holder and allow professional grading services to examine it. Proper grading can confirm authenticity and determine its true market value. Collectors also carefully examine the mint mark area beneath the date. Because this coin has no mint mark, confirming that blank space is essential. Counterfeit coins sometimes attempt to remove mint marks, so experts use magnification to verify the metal surface has not been altered. Demand for rare wheat pennies continues to grow every year as new collectors enter the hobby. At the same time, the number of surviving coins from the early 20th century keeps shrinking. That imbalance between supply and demand is exactly what drives auction prices to astonishing levels. Which leads to a powerful possibility. Somewhere right now, inside a forgotten drawer, an old jar of pennies, or even a pocket full of change, another 1941 wheat penny may still be hiding among ordinary coins. A tiny coin mistaken for spare change. A hidden treasure carrying a silent fortune. And now we are about to reach the most shocking moment of this entire countdown. The final coin is the one that truly stuns collectors. Coin number 8. The final coin in this countdown begins with a moment that almost nobody would recognize as important. A man cleaning out his late grandfather's attic discovered a small wooden cigar box hidden beneath old photographs and letters. Inside the box were dozens of wheat pennies, dull copper coins that looked like nothing more than sentimental keepsakes from another era. As he slowly poured them onto the table, most of the coins blended together in a quiet metallic shuffle. But one penny stood out. Its surface carried a deep black layer that hinted at a century of aging. To an untrained eye, it looked dark and worn, maybe even damaged. But moments like this are where hidden fortunes quietly appear. Because sometimes, inside a forgotten attic box, sits a hidden treasure that collectors around the world are desperately searching for. Stay with me here, because what you're about to hear changes everything. That coin was a 1919 wheat penny with no mint mark, struck more than 100 years ago at the historic Philadelphia Mint. The year 1919 was a powerful turning point in American history. The world had just emerged from the devastation of World War I, and the United States was stepping into a new era of industrial growth and social change. Factories were expanding, cities were growing rapidly, and millions of coins were being produced to support everyday commerce. Yet time has a way of erasing history. Most of the pennies minted during that year were spent endlessly, worn down, lost, or melted over decades. Only a tiny fraction survived long enough to become collectible treasures. The design of the 1919 wheat penny is one of the most iconic images ever placed on American currency. On the obverse side appears the thoughtful profile of Abraham Lincoln. His portrait faces right, representing leadership and unity during some of the most difficult chapters in American history. Above Lincoln's head is the phrase, "In God We Trust," a motto deeply connected to the nation's identity. To the left side of the portrait appears the word liberty, while just beneath Lincoln's shoulder sits the small but powerful detail that determines this coin's story, the date 1919. Beneath that date, collectors look carefully for a mint mark. But on this coin there is none, confirming that it was struck in Philadelphia. Turn the coin over, and the famous wheat design appears. Two elegant wheat stalks frame the edges of the reverse side, creating a simple agricultural symbol of prosperity and strength. Between those wheat stalks sit the words "ONE Cent" and "United States of America," while the Latin phrase "E pluribus unum" stretches across the upper portion of the coin. This reverse design became so beloved that collectors eventually named the entire series the legendary Lincoln Wheat Penny. Now let's look closer at the technical details of this century-old coin, because collectors study these measurements carefully. The 1919 wheat penny was struck using a bronze alloy composed of 95% copper combined with 5% tin and zinc. This mixture gave the coin its rich reddish tone when it first left the mint. The coin weighs approximately 3.11 grams, light enough to balance gently on a fingertip. Its diameter measures 19 millimeters, and the thickness averages around 1.52 millimeters. Like most early Lincoln cents, the edge of the coin is completely smooth, what numismatists call a plain edge. But here is the detail that most people misunderstand. The coin carries a dark black surface layer, the result of natural copper aging over more than a century. Many people would assume that dark color means the coin is dirty or damaged. In reality, experienced collectors often value natural toning because it proves the coin has not been aggressively cleaned or altered. Over time, copper slowly reacts with oxygen and environmental elements, forming protective layers that can range from brown to deep black. That natural patina tells a story of authenticity. And that brings us to one of the most important warnings in coin collecting. Never clean a rare coin. Cleaning might seem harmless, especially if a coin looks dark or aged. But polishing or scrubbing removes the delicate microscopic surfaces created during the minting process. Once those surfaces disappear, the coin loses much of its value. Professional grading services can detect cleaning marks immediately under magnification, which is why collectors always recommend leaving rare coins exactly as they are. Imagine the life journey this penny may have taken across more than a century. It might have circulated during the Roaring '20s when jazz music filled American cities. It could have passed through countless hands during the economic hardship of the Great Depression. Perhaps it was used to buy groceries, newspapers, or train tickets before eventually being tucked away in a jar or box and forgotten. Coins like this silently witness history. They move from generation to generation, and sometimes they end up in an auction room where their true value is finally revealed. Picture a quiet hall filled with serious collectors. Bright white lights illuminate a glass display case at the front of the room. Inside that case rests the 1919 wheat penny, sealed in a protective holder so bidders can study every detail. To someone unfamiliar with coin collecting, it still looks like a simple, dark penny. But the collectors in that room know they are looking at something extremely rare, a century-old coin preserved in fine condition with original surfaces. The auctioneer lifts the display. The room becomes silent. Bidding begins. $5,000. $10,000. The numbers climb quickly as collectors recognize the rarity of the coin. $20,000. $30,000. $40,000. Soon the tension in the room begins to build as more bidders join the competition. $50,000. $70,000. $90,000. Then the bidding crosses a number that surprises many people watching. $100,000. But the collectors are not finished. $120,000. $150,000. $180,000. The price continues rising as the remaining bidders compete for the coin. $200,000. $230,000. $270,000. $300,000. At this point, the room is completely silent except for the auctioneer's voice. Only a few determined collectors remain, each raising their paddle slowly, carefully pushing the price higher. $320,000. $330,000. Finally, the auctioneer raises the hammer for the last call. The final bid lands at an astonishing $348,000. For a single penny, a tiny coin smaller than a button. Once worth just 1 century, now worth more than many homes. A piece of copper history that quietly survived more than a century before revealing itself as one of the most valuable wheat pennies ever discovered, which is exactly why collectors repeat the same warning again and again. Do not spend this coin. If you ever discover an old wheat penny like this, resist the urge to clean it or polish it. Even gentle rubbing can reduce its value dramatically. Place the coin in a protective holder and allow professional grading services to authenticate it and assign an official grade. Proper grading can transform an ordinary-looking penny into a verified collector's treasure. And here's the thought that should stay with you after this video ends. Right now, somewhere in the world, a forgotten coin jar, an old piggy bank, or a dusty drawer may still hold a penny like this. A small copper coin quietly waiting to be noticed. A hidden treasure carrying a silent fortune. So, before you spend your next penny, take a closer look at the date. Because sometimes the smallest coin in your pocket can change everything. And if this video saves you from accidentally spending a fortune, make sure you subscribe. These are the kinds of coin secrets most people never hear about, and the next discovery could be hiding in your change right now.